I would like to make these points, and that I'm going to pull out one of your comments, Thomas. Teenage pregnancy. I'm going to go back to the genesis of my point. It depends on who's reporting it. The other community, the Caucasian community, use the abortion clinic more than we do. We tend to keep ours. They get rid of them. I can say that firsthand because in a lot of this discussion, I'm looking at it from two minds. I started off my at 3 years of age, I actually attended Head Start at a Jewish temple. And for two and a half years, I was around Jewish persons, those formative years. And then I attended Miami Edison Park Elementary School, where I was in the first class of students who integrated that school. I was in first grade, my brother in second, and one in fifth. And we integrated the school. As a matter of fact, the principal didn't even open the door until about 11:30. We stood out there from about 7 that morning. And as I'm talking to you all, I can still feel the sweat in my eyes. We had to stand in the line, and it was African-American children. And back then, there was a lot of Puerto Ricans. There weren't that many Cubans here yet in Miami. And definitely no Nicaraguans or El Salvador, any other cultures. So we stood out there. And so I went through that phase from the Jewish culture to integrating, and then our teachers were white, and the ones who did not leave just tolerated us long enough until they retired. So I experienced that at an early age. And after 3 years at that school, first, second, and third grade, my family decided to send us to school on Miami Beach with rich Jewish people. And then all of my friends from fourth grade to 11th grade were all filthy rich. For the most part, they had maids and butlers. So I hung out with them, and I learned two sides of the fence, so to speak. I learned how they lived because I lived along with them. I spend most weekends with my friends, and I go boating. I'd eat in restaurants. I understood what they ate. And then I understood how, when I came back home in the city during the week, it was a split screen for me. And then subsequent to that, my brothers, I have two brothers and one sister who were married to Caucasians. Because of our exposure, we were exposed. And we didn't have a racist bone in our family. So I have mulatto nieces and nephews. I have a Jewish sister-in-law. I have an Italian brother-in-law, and I have an Anglo-Saxon sister-in-law. And it's no problem with us. Now, I said that to say this, that again, it depends on who's reporting what. What was not reported is that statistically, those of us who went to school in those environments ended up where? Very few of us ended up in jail because we were on that side of the fence. However, my counterparts, my immediate neighbors around me, they just fell in line with that prison pipeline. It was assumed that you're going to be nothing and you're going to go into the pipeline. And it was just accepted from an early age. By the time I get here, I'll be in jail. Okay, everybody else around me going, I'm going. So it was my neighborhood friends in the prison pipeline and myself and my siblings going elsewhere. And that's with me from the same setting. I was able to grow both sides, but I do hear persons talking when they say Black Lives Matter. For me, that's a split screen again. And we'll talk about that later, but go ahead.
Well, I have a question in regards to Black Lives Matter. I wanted to know, why is there this perception? Well, I have a question after this too, so please come back to me. But this one, Black Lives Matter is now perceived as not really dealing with Black on Black crime so much as maybe with police on Black crime. Do you perceive it that way? And why do you think others perceive it that way? You want to start us off? We'll start with Kirk.
Is that what they actually perceive? Is what is perceived?
Well, that's what I'm seeing in my readings and stuff of articles now. People are saying, like, with all those crimes that I mentioned to you that just happened recently, many of which are in the Black communities, people are asking, okay, so you got this Black Lives Matter movement. What about, and I hear it because I hear it from people who are non-Black, and they're saying, okay, you guys are killing each other. What about that? So how do you how do we how do you all perceive the Black Lives Matter movement? Is it because when you see them out there, they don't have signs up that say stop killing each other. They don't have signs up there to say this many people were killed. They don't have pictures of people who were victims by abuses or fatalities that came from another Black person. All we see are people's deaths being validated, and these aren't my words, but being validated because their lives were taken by someone who was non-Black. How do
let me just say this, and I've heard this said more than once or twice since this whole thing started, and I agree with the statement wholeheartedly. You can't change what has been going on for 400 plus years in a matter of a month. It's just not going to happen. A lot of this stuff that we see and experience is systemic. And as we all have discussed here this evening, a lot of the problems that we experience in our community, at the core, it comes from institutional racism. Okay, institutional racism is a mental health problem. Okay, it's a mental health problem, and it's one that has permeated and trickled down to a lot of different facets of our existence. As I mentioned at the onset of our discussion, one of the things that I have found is, as Black people, we have a lot of displaced anger. Okay, we can't control a lot of the other things that we have to deal with in society as it pertains to our white counterpart. However, we can control our actions, and we can control our surroundings in our community. So when we come home from a bad day's work, dealing with the Mr. Charlie, as my father would call him, we may take it out on our wife. We may take it out on our kids, or we gonna take it out on our Black brothers and sisters. That's what we do and what we have done. And getting back to what you said, yeah, we do have a problem with in our community in terms of not self-policing and killing one another. Just to give you a perfect example, we had an incident here in Akron about a week and a half ago. Young lady was killed at a traffic light. She was in the car with her grandmother. And initially, when the report came out, it was said that it was a racial incident. A white guy in a Camaro pulled up on her and shot her. And everybody was up in arms on that particular situation, about that particular situation. It was all over the front page of the news. It was on the TV. But eventually what came out is the witnesses didn't see the shooter. It initially was said that it was a racial situation, but then it came out, well, we didn't really see the shooter. There was tinted windows, so on and so forth, blah, blah, blah. And when I heard that, I was like, oh man, this is bad. Because my spirit just told me she was killed by some black people. Because going back to what we said earlier, crimes are committed intraracially. So when they said they didn't see the shooter, I was like, she was probably killed by some black people. And it turned out that she was. Case of mistaken identity. Some 17-year-old black guy rolled up on her and her grandma thinking that she was somebody else and killed her. And getting back to what you were saying, this gives just cause to what they're saying or asking you. Well, what are you doing in your community? What are you doing about your community? Do Black lives really matter to you all?
Well,
and that's a legitimate question. It's a very legitimate question.
I don't think it is. I don't think it is. I think Tyrone hit it right on the head earlier when he kept saying and kept mentioning about the reporting. Now, if you really look at it, and you have to look at it with particularity because it's not something you can easily glean from the internet search or the news. There are far more marches, far more protests, far more activity in the community on an everyday basis around this country with local groups of mothers and fathers, concerned citizens talking about crime in their community. It's every day. It's just not reported. Now, you do have these extraordinary events that occur. And then you have organizations like Black Lives Matter that get very active in it. And it's a news issue. Why? Because that type of news spreads. But you're not going to get the news to come down when there's mothers or fathers who are meeting at the local church or meeting at the school or going to the local precinct to complain about X, Y, and Z, or talking to the school resource counselor about what happened in school that week. That must make the news. And that's far more, that happens far more often than these particular marches or demonstrations against police brutality. Now, if you want to really look at it, there's a quite big difference. Crime is crime that happens everywhere. And as we discussed, it happens, as you said, intraracially, happens amongst people who are close to one another. But this is a different issue what Black Lives Matter is dealing with. They're talking about the construct of our nation, the actual institutional racism against citizens of the United States. That's a different issue. It's a larger issue, far more complex issue. It's an issue that affects our very existence. Now, if even the crime were to decline in our neighborhood, you still had to face institutional racism. And you still had an occupying armed force of police officers in our communities treating us like we were garbage. There are too many instances to find a man or woman being shot in the back. Total disregard for someone's home, coming with a no-knock warrant at 2 a.m., shooting whoever the hell is there without regard for if you actually got the right person or not. This stuff happens all the time. Prisoners dying in prison, defendants dying in police custody. It does not happen to those who are not Black and brown. It just does not. Now, we go about statistics, we can go to the DOJ and anyone else who has statistics. That is far more on us than it's on them. You rarely find white people being shot in the back. And if they are, someone's being held accountable. When we get shot in the back, for some reason, an officer could say, I felt that I was in danger, and he's cleared or acquitted. So I don't take the argument that Black Lives Matter is not dealing with our issue of crime in the community. Just because they're dealing with that particular issue doesn't mean that they can't deal with other things, but the very same people who are active here were also active in the community. They weren't getting any notice. The very same people. It happens every day. It doesn't make the news. And if we're busy at work, how the hell do we know what's going on? But it's happening. I'm a defense attorney. I see it all the time. Whether it's my clients who've been accused or my clients' families who've been victimized, I'm going to the police station to deal with something else. It's always there. It's rampant. But no, it's not going to make the news. So I don't give that any type of respect at all with regard to Black lives not dealing with crime in the Black community. Not at all.
Well, I think the reason why a lot of this stuff is making the news now is because of social media, and everybody's got a phone. You know, we're basically policing the police now. You know,
Yes.
That and the fact that they have these body cameras. Otherwise, a lot of this stuff would be swept underneath the rug, and we wouldn't even see it or know about it.
Correct. Correct.
So,
Can I make?
Go ahead.
I would like to make let me draw a parallel between these 2 points. With these, most guys that I knew growing up who went on the police force were weak, nerds, didn't have no backbone. And when you take them through that 3 or 4 month course in the police academy and you train them and you make them understand if you do something wrong, the police union is going to protect you. We got your back. Then you make them feel invincible. So when they get out there and they're kicking guys when they're already handcuffed and, you know, doing other nefarious acts, you make them believe they're above the law. And I say that to draw this parallel right here. What are the statistics regarding Black officers who are abusing white folks? Reverse that trend. This is mostly all these white guys who are shooting down Black guys, but you don't see that trend often. I think in somewhere in Texas, one of the officers who they fired, so he went rogue and he started shooting other officers. That's somewhere in the last 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years.
Right.
But that's you got to scratch your head to find a officer of color, and there are many of them out there. They have Black law enforcement associations, and you don't see them carrying on like that. And I'd like to I ask myself that question. I'm asking you all that, but don't answer it. That's a rhetorical question. Then my justification for asking that and then answering my own question is that these Black officers come out of tougher neighborhoods. And when they run up on a tough person, they're not intimidated. They're ready to, you know, they know how to resolve an issue. That's what I said earlier. As Black men, we have to grow up, we have to fight. And you learn to resolve issues. You can recognize when someone's smarting for a fight, and you can de-escalate better. But these white guys are wimps. And you come up on a big burly Black guy, and that guy start moving around like this, those officers reach for their weapon immediately. They're intimidated. They can't handle it. They didn't come out from that background. So for me, I would think that answers itself. The Black guys are tougher so they can handle a tougher situation. The white guys are weaker and they go for their weapon. That's an interesting thing. I've been waiting for someone in the press to ask that or bring that out and do a study on that. Black officers shooting down other races versus white race shooting down as many as we see that are chronicled in the Black community.
So let me just interject this, and then I have one final question for you guys. I with our company, Soul Network, and just as a mission for life, my whole thing has been to give a voice to people, whether they be professionals or if they're community leaders or students. Today we started our Global Leadership Academy, where we have students from Ohio, Georgia, and Florida. And they're all girls, but they're middle school and high schoolers. And I'm trying to bring them together to create a social consciousness. So each week for the next 5 weeks, and then from October to April, what they do is they do a project, and these projects have to write politicians. They're going to do a public service announcement that's due next week. And they're all dealing with issues that we're facing today on a national and or international level. So we do that from a personal standpoint. One of the things that I've tried to do, because I live in a Black area, and I know that I hear the activity all the time, even if I'm not out there. And I want to commend you guys for holding to your roots based on where you live. But everybody can't be like me and donate and give as much time. My calling has taken me over the top. We had missionaries stay with us some months ago. We feed the homeless. We bring people in that are homeless. Me and my family take chances that other people might not take, just to get people off the street so that they won't get hurt. We take food and toiletries, because me and my kids have had hard times and experienced different things. We know what it feels like to be in a homelessness situation. So we go to the guys that are in front of the Dollar Tree and the Family Dollar, and we give them things. Anytime they ask me for something, I give it to them, because I know how it feels to be on either end of the spectrum, to come from very little or to have a whole lot and then sometimes end with nothing. So what I try to do is serve as an encourager, because that is my calling in life. And I've had homeless people ask me, I buy them food, and then they say, "Hey, do you have some clothes that I can wear?" And I think it's just something that God has put on my heart, put on my forehead, for people to know that they can approach me like that, and in turn we're blessed. But one of the things that I find in the Black community, and it's been like this for so long, and I guess I'm a fan of Jawanza Kunjufu when he wrote the book Black Economics. And I remember on the cover of that book, it had the black hand and it had the white hand exchanging money. And the very small turnover of money in the Black community has always been an issue, and it's always been a concern of mine. And I know that, you guys, being educated individuals, you understand that this is a problem. So we talk about the poverty, the correlation with the poverty and the crime. How can we develop or tackle this mindset that we have to buy things anytime that we get some money, but in turn buy it from other people? There used to be a time when, and growing up on the east side of Cleveland, when the corner store was owned by this guy, Mr. Eddie. When the supermarket just 3 blocks up, IGA supermarket, was owned by a Black man, and he had 7 other IGA supermarkets. And you could go from one business to the next, and you got your wings from Kim's, you know what I mean? And then and they're still in business, and you could buy, the little ice, whatever they used to do, freeze the little Kool-Aid and stuff. But there was a time when we used to do business with each other. And I remember being one to hustle and try to sell things. And I was successful in my own community, even though the people didn't have much. How do we change that mindset so that we can keep some of that and sort of like redirect the crime, because we'll have something?
Tiffany, if I may, it's that let up that I spoke about earlier. When there's a let up in our community, we run somewhere else because it seems greener on the other side. Now, we do not even actually have to figure it out. We just need to go back to what we used to do prior to integration. I remember growing up, the dentist was Black in Liberty City. The doctor was Black. We didn't have to move outside of that community. Immigrant communities have come here, and they have established on that same concept and maintain. Whereas we decided, it's better. I can't shop locally. I need to drive across town or go out across the tracks where I was not permitted to go before, and take the whole family, and then we're going to go buy from over there because the potato chips are more expensive, but it sure feels good to go with the white people where they shop at, if I may. Now, we need to put that genie back inside of the bottle and try to start to reconfigure. Through social media, I noticed my daughter and them, they're eons ahead of us. They're already doing stuff like that, and they speak, and that's why the protests are so popular, because who said, I think Thomas said earlier that everyone has cameras. Was that the good Noop who said that? One of you all said, oh, okay. So now, so they're producing their own media productions, and they're buying from each other, and they're aware of what's what. My daughter makes masks, and she went on social media. She made gobs of money. And now, we just need to redirect and go back to where we were and start going to HBCUs again. And then let those athletes understand that, when you run for UM making millions of dollars of endorsements while you're running your tail out there on that field, talking about the U. What about, look at Florida Memorial starting football. How many top players will they get come to their program? Almost none, because they want to go to Oklahoma or go somewhere else. The let up has allowed us to let the genie out of the bottle. Let's put it back in. We already figured it out years ago.
Remember, we've always been told that the white man's ice is colder.
Colder.
Right.
Right.
So like my children, first I have 3 children, and my youngest daughter, 11 years old, thankfully, she was born in 2009, so she's the only person in my family who has always known a Black president. But on top of that, everything we do is Black, right? My pediatrician, my wife's doctors, my doctors, the plumber. When I get car service, whomever I'm called, I can find someone, or I will find someone who's Black. And if I don't do that, if I don't buy Black or pay Black, it's only because I couldn't find it. And if I can't find it, the next time over, I'm going to try to find it. Because Tiffany made the perfect point. And we learned this at FMC, that when that dollar comes out of the community, after the first or second or third cycle, the community plummets. But your point is correct, that when immigrant communities come to this country, they rarely go outside their community. That dollar stays in. The stores are staffed by their family or kinfolk. They get suppliers who are their own. They supply to other people who are their own. They only go to doctors, only go to lawyers, only go to the accountants, only go to shoe salesmen that are their own. And that perpetuates itself. You build your community just as you would build your household if your money went around your household. We don't do that. And I'm going to get to this. And I know that Tiffany had a whole bunch of questions and a whole bunch of issues for us to discuss. And I always say, this is not an excuse, but it is an explanation. And that our existence here is rooted in what was handed down to slavery, and we're not that many generations away from that. And just as you can find in colonial parts of the African continent, the same thing applies. Now, when you find families and communities that do not have the remnants of either US slavery or colonialism in Africa, you find a totally different outcome. The prospects, the institutions, the activities, the mindset, the perspectives are all different. But as you said, each and every time we're looking outside of our community for something, because the white man's ice is colder. And if we were to look within, that would change. And when we changed to integration, that all went away. When we were forced to have ourselves within our own community, we did. And things were great. You had a much greater Black middle class, actually. You had a much more stable community, actually, and you had people persisting in their professions and actually handing it down to their children. Now, if you have a mom or dad who has a son or daughter, once the mom and dad gets older, you typically have that son and daughter incapable of holding on to the home that the mom and dad is providing to them. that's generational wealth going out the window. Why? Because we don't have the constant turnover of knowledge of institutional wealth. Making sure you have life insurance to succeed to the children, making sure you have property to give to the children. Usually our children, when they get the opportunity of freedom from the household, they're trying to, quote, get a job, not get ownership of a business. They're trying to get a job on a trade so they can have that for life, you know, and we haven't taught that. And again, it wasn't taught because we didn't have it from before. And it's not such an excuse, it's an explanation. So to answer the question, I think, is to go back to what we had before by looking into ourselves and realizing we don't have to go outside our community. We don't really have to.
Oh, go ahead, Kurt.
No, I was going to say I agree with both of you brothers, both of you good brothers, what you have said. One of the major problems that we have in our community is that we don't promote entrepreneurship enough. You know, the mindset is go out and get a job. But like Thomas said, you can't hand down the job to your child. You know, you can hand down a business though. You can teach that child your business and hand it down, you know, to them. Another thing that we don't know in our community is how to leverage debt. We have this mindset that the white man, some of the white people have taught it that debt is bad. Okay. Yeah. But the smart white people understand, you know, debt is good. It's how you leverage yourself, you know, because United States is a debt service society. How you come up is borrowing, you know, and if you want to come up quick, you borrow some money and buy, you know, assets that can make you more money. But people have not been taught that, but it's changing. You know, it's changing with the onset of social media and you know, websites like YouTube. You know, you can learn anything that you want out on YouTube, and there's plenty of videos that teach these things. Yeah, and brothers are out there creating videos, teaching other brothers how to come up, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing, and you know, I'm just very optimistic.
I am too.
I'm optimistic. You know, I don't look at what we're going through as doom and gloom. I think it's a huge opportunity. Yeah, it's a huge opportunity for us to make some changes and to come up as a people. It's a wake-up call.
I want to say, with respect to Black Lives Matter, let me insert a different dimension. HBCUs need to do a better job of promoting their graduates. And here's what I mean by that. It starts while they are matriculating. I know at Florida Memorial, we used to have the Chicago Club and the Florida Club, and you got together by your cities. And then you join a Greek letter organization. And the small HBCU, that is a big thing. If you're non-Greek, you know, people still, it's hard to understand why you didn't pledge if you went through an HBCU or eventually pledged later. But going back to my point, it is, you start to take the business department and let them caucus and let them start selling products on campus. They start cutting their teeth there. And when they go out, you keep the organization going. You keep these professional. I know there's some sororities and fraternities that are business, that are Black business organizations. They need to get out further, and the HBCUs need to emphasize to their graduates that form a coalition. Your music teachers, form a BMI, whatever you call it, when you a Black music publishing organization. Start looking at these things and stop. Let Beyonce and them come to you and Jiggy Boo and then when we get hood, everything got to be something lil or something big. Why got to be always Lil Jiggy or big money or, you know, and it goes some more derogatory terms. And then we started, but then you got all these guys out there making millions, these gangster rappers, but they got to turn to someone else to handle their money. John Greenberg, and then the lawyer they pick up is Howard Goldstein, and they, you know, and they're told that these people are better. So, and now Black Lawyers Association, somehow or another, when students are matriculating in those majors, there seems to be a disconnect somewhere along the way. And I think Black Lives Matter professionally as well. And if we're going to hold our communities together, when you say Black Lives Matter, I'm telling you, I look at it from many, many different perspectives. And that's one that I have a pet peeve with. I don't see enough of that out there. Even the Black journalists, they're in an organization, but I don't see them out front. Protest, Don Lemon and this, that, and the next, all of them should have been on the ground somewhere together. And that young journalists in school matriculating see a bunch of Black journalists and the police Black with the association, see all of them out there, and you start to say, oh man, our Black community got it going on. Black Lives Matter in those respects as well, professionally. And I think we need to do a better job, and that'll start to tie things together.
Agreed. 100% agreed. Good point. Because I think that what WB always talks with the talent intent, and whether you agree with that or not, the reality of it is that the leaders should be out front leading, right? You can't have all this talent, all this opportunity, all this gravitas and assets and behold it to yourself. So all of our professional organizations and other type of entities ought to come forward and be out front. I 100% agree. And that would, I think, change the focus both from our perspective and from the outer white perspective. They need to see more of us like that in strength. In strength, because any other community does that all the time. My daughter was doing a project for a school, and she was doing a report on Angela Davis, as grounded as she is. And Angela Davis, she's outspoken on everything. And she was given a humanitarian award in her hometown of Birmingham, Alabama. And she was on her way there to accept the award. This happened like 2-3 years ago. Right as she got to accept the award, it was snatched from her. Why? Because she has spoken up on behalf of the Palestinians with regard to what was happening in Israel. And she was a supporter of the BDS movement to boycott, disinvest, and whatever. And they snatched the award from her in her hometown. And she had to say, I'm not upset because I expected it. Why did she expect it? Because other communities, they come together. All aspects of it. You impinge one thing and they all coalesce. The wagons start to circle. And I was explaining to my son some time ago, when we were talking about Michael Jackson, I said there was a time when Michael Jackson was the most powerful person on the planet. I mean, untouchable. And at the same time, hip hop was going well. But in every single other hip hop song, you heard the word nigger, bitch, and everything else. And it was okay. Michael Jackson said the word kike once.
Yeah.
He said, do me once. And millions of albums were recalled immediately.
Yes.
They went to stores around the nation. They secured those literal albums and CDs, brought them back, destroyed them. They re-recorded, went over the words, took them out, edited it, and sent them back out. This was Michael Jackson at the time, most powerful on earth.
He said, do me, Jew me.
Yes.
And they went nuts.
And those same companies promoted albums when we are shooting each other up, when we're saying this and that. And the whole night, they would say that, oh, we would allow that because that's part of their art. That's part of their creativity. And they're just telling stories, so we'll allow them to say that. But Mike, the most powerful man at that time, had millions of albums. They went to stores, got them back. And so my issue is, if we coalesce like that, right? The question earlier was, why is Black Lives Matter focusing so much on the crimes perpetrated by white officers on Black people and not necessarily Black on Black crime? Well, if we coalesce so that Black Lives Matter could concentrate on those things, and then the rest of our institutions concentrate on all those other things, and they hear from us always on everything, it might be a little different. You know, when our fraternities and sororities, we're into everything. We do scholarships, we do voter registration. And when we get together and they see all these proud Black people of education, of achievement in all roles of society, there isn't any white organization as powerful as our Divine Nine. You really can't find it. Not with all aspects of genius in all categories. There isn't. If we were to do that on a regular basis, you know, whether the issue was of an international, whether the issue was national, or a particular local issue we had to deal with as these particular killings, things would be different. So going to your point, we don't coalesce in a way, and we should.
Well, let me just piggyback on what you said about Michael Jackson, because I would argue that Mike wasn't the most powerful. He might have been the most popular, but he wasn't the most popular, because if he was powerful, it wouldn't have mattered what he said. But he didn't own anything in terms of his distribution.
That's
you
true.
understand? You understand what I'm saying? So a person, Master P, Percy Miller, he can say whatever he wants because he owns his distribution. You know what I'm saying? So we got to get out of the mindset of running to the white man to do what we do, whether it be going to his school. I mean, I listened to Kyrie Irving last week talk about how these NBA players shouldn't go play right now, and how this is a huge opportunity to start our own league. And I was like, that's brilliant. He's right. But you got a lot of coons out there that are like, no, let's go get this money. You know, this is a huge time for us to speak out on this and this and that. But I'm with Kyrie on this. I'm with him. What do you brothers think about that?
Well, I think it's a great idea if they were to be able to get together to get their own league and control it. Wonderful. I also think that, unfortunately, we have celebrities who are the benchmark for many of our people. And to that extent, we should be feeling fortunate that we do have brothers in the NBA in particular who are at least far more forthright than other people have been in speaking up. And I would love for them to continue with the platform in speaking up. And I do think that the platform is a bit larger and louder if their season continues. But I definitely understand and support what Kyrie would be talking about with regard to starting their own. They definitely have the ability to do so. The networks are only going to go where the stars are. You know, they started the USFL. Right. If all the stars left, you know, we had the same argument about the, Tyrone was talking about the HBCUs. If you get 10 of the top 50 players out of high school decide not to go to the SEC or ACC, and they will go to an HBCU.
Don't forget the Big Ten now. Don't forget the Big Ten.
Yeah, Big Ten, Pac-10.
I know, I forgot you missed it. But
OHIO.
To the HBCUs, can you imagine what would happen? There would be a flood. And these young guys got to understand, most of them at these schools don't graduate. You would graduate at an HBCU, and the HBCU would guarantee that for the rest of your life, you could always come back and graduate. And your kids might go there free too. They don't understand what's available to them. And a few of us have been trying to talk to them to see if we can get just 1 or 2 or 3 to say, you know what? I'm going to be seen no matter what. I'm great. They're going to find me. If I'm going to HBCU where I'm loved, I can have a year's wonderfulness among family. Do you know what that'll do for that person and that school and that community? And if people start leaving those schools and come to HBCUs, you can significantly change everything.
Absolutely.
Think about that TV money going to HBCUs. No more money problems. Really. Right?
Excellent.
Black Lives Matter. You know, in all aspects.
Yeah.
All aspects of life. And we need to showcase that big time. I've told my daughter multiple times, stop going in Hollywood hair and elegant hair company get together with some of your friends and start your own hair business since you all like hair so much. You're always buying, you're spending your money somewhere else. Get together and figure out where does the hair come from anyway? Where is it manufactured? In Asia somewhere, some Asian country? And then you go in the shop and it's Swami and Punjab and them selling it to you.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even know how to do the hair. They can't even put the first roll in your hair, but they're selling you the products. So you all get together and do a string of franchises for what do you call it, hair stores, beauty supplies. Yeah. And, start to do that. See, there's a lot of things. Black Lives Matter. Again, I look at it in the broad sense because it does all matter to me, and it begins to reverberate right back to that point where building our communities and putting the genie back in the bottle is possible. We had it before. And then when they said that one word, integration, and we start scattering. What? Go somewhere else better over there. And we left our own communities abandoned. And I can't think of any other community in America where that has happened except our own. So we need to bring it all back in, put it back in the bottle. Black lives truly do matter.
Tyrone,
Absolutely.
Were you gonna say something, Thomas?
I agree with Tyrone 100%, but I don't blame us. I recognize it's not so much of an excuse, it's an explanation when you talk about why we are the way we are. And again, generational input from the embarkment of slavery is predominant. I'm not going back to it as an excuse, but you got to really understand that if you look at us, we, I think, pretty much secure in knowing that not only our children, but our grandchildren and great-grandchildren will be on better footing than we were. It was very difficult for our forefathers and sisters to have that mindset in 1875, 10 years removed from slavery. They had no backdrop as to what they could rely on. They could not go back to anything. Looking at 1920 and 1944, my mom was born at that particular time. There was maybe one or two generations of Black folk who owned just a slight bit, not much to pass on and on. They definitely couldn't hold much property, couldn't sell or provide homes and have generational wealth, right? And so now you get to the 1950s, 1960s when integration starts to come in. Now, many of us, our men came back from the war and the GI Bill wasn't really applicable to them. They couldn't really participate and benefit from that, but they had a little bit. And again, their little bit and their victory was to have a job outside of what their parents had, to maybe not have to be a janitor, maybe be someone in an office with a white collar shirt. And that was great. And then the 70s came, and then the Vietnam War came. And again, we didn't have much to go on. There's a few families, there's a small segment, maybe out of 100%, you had maybe 15 or 20% of us who had a different outlook, but the vast majority did not. And then when you look at the economic policies and degrading people with all of the welfare state, the whole 9 yards, again, perpetuating that, got people who don't quite understand, have it within them to build upon that. It's a generational thing. It's not an excuse to look at slavery as the cause of it. It's good to look at it as an explanation for it.
Yeah. I just want to thank you guys, and I appreciate you creating a paradigm shift for many of our viewers that are going to see this, and for myself as well. Because I had just talked to my daughter this morning after some decisions we had made about grad school. And I remember something Thomas said to me about, we want our kids to be able to test well enough to go to Ivy League, but we want them to go to HBCUs so we can patronize our own. And I appreciate you and the way you guys think, and you're such marvelous role models. I want you to know that I thank you once again for your time, and I'm just elated that so many people are going to get to hear your voices.